Upon completion of this tutorial, you will be able to define and recognize plagiarism, explain the importance of citation in the scholarly environment, demonstrate strategies to avoid inadvertent plagiarism through acknowledgement of someone else's ideas unless the information is common knowledge, using your own words to paraphrase or summarize the words of someone else, using quotation marks to identify the words of others. Recognize and explain the consequences of plagiarism. Plagiarism is a type of academic dishonesty. Plagiarism is defined as using someone else's ideas or original work without giving proper credit in your course projects, including papers, presentations, posters, and more. Many students find themselves plagiarizing by accident when they carelessly or inadequately cite the original work. To learn more about the kinds of plagiarism you want to avoid, let's look at the results of a survey from the company Turnitin.com. They surveyed secondary and higher education faculty worldwide to discover the 10 most common forms of plagiarism. They are listed in order of the most frequently used to least frequently used forms of plagiarism. Plagiarizing at ASU can come with some serious consequences, ranging from a lower grade on a project to expulsion. So play it smart and learn the best strategies for avoiding plagiarism. Learn about the types of plagiarism to avoid, when to cite, and how to successfully use information in your course projects by summarizing, paraphrasing, and knowing when and how to quote. Plagiarism is not always clear-cut and obvious. To help you avoid accidentally plagiarizing, you need to develop and practice skills that provide the keys to properly incorporating sources in your research. These skills revolve around citing, summarizing or paraphrasing, and quoting. So here are some general rules when using and citing sources for research papers and assignments. Ask yourself, should I cite it? If you use an idea from a source, cite it, even the smallest, most simple idea. If you use any wording from a source, cite it. Use quotations when you use someone else's words, even if you are rephrasing much of the source's ideas into your own words. If you use the organizational structure of a source, cite it. If you use a fact or statistic from a source, cite it. Even the tiniest little fact or statistic should be cited, especially if you think it is not common knowledge. If you use an image, table, graph, or so on from a source, cite it. If you are uncertain about citing something, to be safe, cite it. Uncertainty is a signal you should pay attention to. One common way to incorporate others' ideas is to summarize or paraphrase. Paraphrasing is restating ideas from an original source, using your own words and giving credit to the original source. For example, here's the text of an original source. Below it is an acceptable paraphrase and summary. In this sample, the main idea expressed in the short paragraph is summarized in one sentence using our own words and construction. Finally, note the in-text citation at the end of our summary and paraphrase, Bornstein, 235. This signals your reader that the idea comes from another source and you are crediting that author. The in-text citation includes the author's last name and page number from the source. Look at these strategies for paraphrasing. Read the original source, then set it aside and imagine explaining the main idea to a friend without going back to look at the source. Write your explanation down. Compare your paraphrase or summary to the original source to see if you have repeated many of the same words or phrases and in the same order. If so, use a quote or quotations. Compare your paraphrase or summary to the original source to ensure you are not unconsciously copying the structure, such as the order of ideas. If you have, then be prepared to change it. Direct quotation, meaning extended word-for-word duplication of an author's original writing, seems pretty straightforward, but sometimes it's hard to know when to use quotations. For example, can you use individual words from the source? Or is there a limit on the number of words you can borrow before quoting? There are no hard and fast rules about the number of words you can use from the original source before using a quote. If you find your paraphrase has many of the same words and phrases as the original, just quote it to avoid plagiarism. In the sample paraphrase, notice the colored text indicates many of the same words and phrases from the original are used. They are rearranged to summarize the main idea from the original, but the amount of words and phrases taken from Bornstein without quotation marks around them is plagiarism. It is better to simply quote the relevant sentence, as in the bottom example, and avoid accidentally plagiarizing the source. The direct quotation is longer, but more honest. Here are 3 great hints for determining if you should quote a source. If the source you are using makes a point better than you can when you attempt a paraphrase or summary, then quote it. Quote a source, especially if the author's words are particularly memorable or powerful. Quotes can be parts of a sentence, apt or memorable phrases, for example, full sentences, or even multiple sentences, but in general, try to limit quoting lengthy passages. Using a source's organizational structure is not common, but an easy way of plagiarizing. Just reviewing a source's table of contents and seeing how the content of a book is organized and presented may be enough to influence the unaware researcher into using the same approach in a research paper. For example, say you have found a great book on entrepreneurship and innovation in business that helps you think about your topic in a more logical and structured way. Even if you don't use the exact same content as in the example, just using the structure is a form of plagiarism. It is the same as taking someone else's ideas and using them without citation, because the editor of this book devised this arrangement of chapters on his own. Now that you have completed this tutorial, you can define and recognize plagiarism, explain the importance of citation in the scholarly environment, demonstrate strategies to avoid inadvertent plagiarism through acknowledgement of someone else's ideas, unless the information is common knowledge, using your own words to paraphrase or summarize the words of someone else, using quotation marks to identify the words of others. Recognize and explain the consequences of plagiarism. Congratulations! You've completed the Plagiarism Awareness tutorial.